about next is some of the context for studying African Christianity in this period, in particular North Africa. So for the next few lectures, we're going to be talking about Rome and how Rome fits with Africa. This lecture, we're going to be talking a bit about the history of Carthage and its relationship to Rome. Carthage had a very complicated history with Rome. And this is important because when we get into our period and we begin seeing how the bishops of Carthage and the bishops of Rome interact with each other, some of the political history plays into this and certainly influences perhaps the way that these bishops interact with each other and the way that other bishops in the West interact with these two bishops. So I want to talk about Rome and North Africa. Because the course is focusing specifically on Carthage, then let's focus on Carthage for a few minutes. And let's talk about where Carthage comes from. So Carthage, according to ancient tradition, was founded by the Phoenicians. And the Phoenicians were a seafaring people. They came from the Eastern Mediterranean, and they traveled throughout the Mediterranean world, founding colonies. And early tradition says that Carthage was one of the colonies founded by these Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were very good on the sea, and so Carthage was very good on the sea. And in a relatively short period of time, Carthage becomes very wealthy and very influential in the Mediterranean world. It becomes one of the sea powers of the entire Mediterranean world in a very short period of time. Because it's a sea power, and because it's wealthy, it also grows. And so by the 6th or 5th century BC, Carthage becomes one of the largest and wealthiest cities in the Mediterranean. So we think about the large mega cities of the ancient world. People don't always think about Carthage, but it was. It was a very large city. Some of the estimates have the population at over 300,000 in the 5th century BC. It's a very large city. Well, there was another city that was also expanding, just across the water, literally across the water, the Romans. And so inevitably and eventually, the power of Carthage and the power of Rome came into direct conflict. And it happened in a series of 3 military campaigns that we call the Punic Wars. And this word Punic comes from the Latin word for Phoenicians. So it's Punic, it's the Phoenician Wars is another way to translate it. We call it the Punic Wars because the Romans referred to the Phoenicians with a word that sounds like Punic. So let's talk about the Punic Wars, what happened in them and what the outcome was. So by the 5th century, as I mentioned, Carthage had become a major power. And in the same period, the power of Rome was expanding. Rome is expanding its holdings in Italy, going down to the bottom of Italy. It's expanding up into mainland Europe. Still very early on, but these two powers are going to come into conflict. So if we look at a map of the western part of the Mediterranean prior to the First Punic War, we have Carthage down here, right on the coast, and anything in pink, so all this section of what is now North Africa, including some of the islands in the Mediterranean, the island of Sardinia and Corsica, and part of the island of Sicily. All these areas in pink were part of the empire of Carthage. Now on this map on the screen, it's hard to see this yellow area. This yellow area represents the power of Rome. And if you think about it, compared to later periods, this is fairly small for Rome. But actually these Punic Wars are very important for Rome to extend its power in other places as well. But you have Rome coming all the way down to the tip of Italy, and you have Carthage coming into Sicily itself. Both of these powers, Rome and Carthage, depend on trade, which means you have to control the shipping routes. And if you're going from Carthage, or if you're sailing from Rome and you're going to the east, you have to sail right past Sicily. So what happens is these two superpowers go to war initially over the control of Sicily. Who's going to control Sicily? If the Romans control Sicily, they can hurt the Carthaginian power. If the Carthaginians can control Sicily, they will fortify their power in this part of the world, and they have the strategic and economic and political advantage over the Romans. So these superpowers fight 3 wars, initially over the control of Sicily, but then these wars expand even farther. So the First Punic War begins in the year 264 and lasts, as you can see here, for a little over 20 years. This is the conflict over Sicily. Back and forth the superpowers go. At some points it looks like Carthage is going to win, and just when it appears the Carthaginians are going to seal their victory on Sicily, the Romans make a bold maneuver and push the Carthaginians back and eventually gain control of Sicily. So the First Punic War lasts over 20 years. It's ultimately a Roman victory, but it's important for Sicily, but the Romans don't push the advantage anymore. They stop there. They've had one conflict with the Carthaginians. They won by a very narrow margin, and they stop. They're content to stop. But in a later period, the son of the Carthaginian general from the First Punic War grows up, and he leads the Carthaginians in a war against Rome, the Second Punic War, which lasts from around 218 to around 201. So this is now the son of the Carthaginian general from the First Punic War is now leading the Second Punic War. And if you look again at the map, leading into the Second Punic War, the Romans control all this southern part of Italy. They control Corsica and Sardinia. They've taken Sicily in the First Punic War, but the Carthaginians still have all of Africa. But now they've pushed farther east in Africa, across the northern coast, and now the Carthaginians have taken the southern part of Spain. So they are expanding their power in other areas. The Romans won Sicily in the First Punic War, but Carthage is taking a different approach to expand its influence. Once again, these superpowers come to a direct conflict. The great general of Carthage in the Second Punic War is Hannibal. And certainly all military historians that I've ever read consider Hannibal one of the greatest generals of history. There are some who say that Hannibal was the greatest general of history. He was a genius in terms of his military tactics, in terms of his political tactics. He single-handedly delivered the greatest defeat to the Romans of all the battles the Romans fought over all the years of the Roman Empire. The single greatest defeat they ever experienced was at the hands of Hannibal in northern Italy. Hannibal is also famous for taking war elephants through the Alps, because Hannibal realized they couldn't just go across the sea and attack Rome directly. They had to go around. So they went up through Spain, through southern France, crossed the Alps, and attacked Italy from the north. And so we have these pictures of Hannibal leading the elephants through the Alps. Who knows what it actually looked like, but elephants through the Alps is substantial. And historically, this seems to be the case. He also crossed the Rhone River, a very broad river, and built a series of barges to take his men across, but also the elephants across. Elephants are not really good with water, but Hannibal found a way to take his elephants across the Rhone River, through the Alps, attacks Italy, and again, it seems as though Carthage is going to win, but at the critical moment, Rome strikes at Carthage itself, and Hannibal has to return home. At the end of the war, Rome again comes out ahead by a very narrow margin, but again, the Romans had defeated the Carthaginians. About 50 years later is the Third Punic War. Rome had, at the end of the Second War, had charged large amounts of war reparations, of penalties against the Carthaginians, and they had also told the Carthaginians, you can never do anything with your military again unless you ask us. Well, the Third Punic War starts because Carthage is getting powerful again. and Rome sees that Carthage has become a threat. There's a Roman politician named Marcus Cato, and no matter what he talked about in the Senate, didn't matter what the topic was, at the end of every speech, he would always say, Carthage must be destroyed. And we all know about politicians who say the same thing all the time, no matter what the topic actually is. For Cato, the topic was Carthage. Carthage must be destroyed. He said, Carthage is becoming too powerful. We're allowing them to become too powerful. We must destroy Carthage. So the Romans launched an assault on the city of Carthage itself, which was one of the greatest fortifications of the ancient world. Eventually, the Romans are successful, and they destroy the city. Estimates are that the population of Carthage may have gone from 500,000 before the Third Punic War to 50,000 after the Third Punic War. It's a total destruction of the city. There's a story that says that the Romans took salt and ground it into the fields to keep crops from growing. We don't know if that ever happened exactly, but we do know that the Romans thoroughly defeated Carthage in the Third Punic War, and they punished the Carthaginians. So if we look at a map, the green area is what the Romans controlled around the year 200, so after the Second Punic War. By the end of the Third Punic War, the areas in brown had been added. Now obviously Greece and Asia, those are separate issues, but here's Carthage. All of this area in Spain had been controlled by Carthage. So as a result of the Third Punic War, Rome expanded in Africa, Spain, southern Gaul, massive expansion of the Roman holdings as a result of their defeat of the Carthaginians. So there's a later story with this. The Romans destroyed Carthage, but then they later rebuilt it. It was Julius Caesar who actually rebuilt the city of Carthage. A city that after the Third Punic War, we may wonder, will Carthage ever come back? Well, in the study of early Christianity, we know that Carthage does come back because Julius Caesar rebuilds the city. And because of the close geographical connection between Carthage and Rome, Carthage remains within the Roman orbit, within the Roman world in a very particular way throughout the ancient period. There was a Roman senator who stood up and he had a date in his hand and he said, you know what this is? And everyone kind of looked at him. He said, this date was picked in Carthage 2 days ago. And I'm holding it here today. In other words, this is how close Carthage is to us. And that connection between Carthage and Rome will continue within Christianity. The connection between the Roman bishops and the Carthaginian bishops, and at times the conflict. So the study of North Africa must include some understanding of Rome, and the study of Rome must include some understanding of North Africa. To tell the story of Africa while ignoring Rome would be to ignore one of the large influences on what's happening in Carthage. And also to talk as if Rome is the only superpower in the West, as if Rome is the only important city in the West, ignores the importance of Carthage. And time again, the importance of Carthage in Christian history is very obvious. Not only just in terms of historical events, but also, as we're going to see in this class, in terms of the development of theology. So Carthage and Rome, these two are linked together in a very particular way. And we'll talk about this sometimes in more explicit ways, but often in the background we'll come back and say, do you see how Cyprian is talking here about the Bishop of Rome? So this subtext is often going to be there. Okay, what questions do you have about this Rome, particularly the Rome-Carthage connection?
Hannibal was just a general, or he is the son of the leader of the First Punic War?
Yes, so Hannibal's father, so the question was about Hannibal's relationship to the general. His father was the leader of the Carthaginian army in the First Punic War. And so he learned a lot from his father. And so growing up, his father taught him to hate the Romans. So his father had died, And he then, at the age of 26, Hannibal becomes the leader of the army. And he feels like he finally has an army to go and try to get his revenge against the Romans. Yes.
And so it was only by a slim margin that Carthage did not become the major capital city, but Rome became the major capital city.
Yeah, so the question is it's only by a slim margin that Carthage does not become the major city and Rome does. And based on the sources, yes, that seems to be correct. Hannibal is on his way to Rome. He really, the Romans are frightened, they're terrified. They feel like they cannot stop this guy because he's already delivered a huge defeat to their army. But it's one of the Roman military leaders who says, our only hope is to go on the offensive. So when they send, because they control Sicily, they can send ships. They send ships to Carthage, and that forces Hannibal to go home. But if it weren't for that really desperate move on the part of the Romans, Hannibal could have defeated Rome, and then Carthage would have been the great power in the West that would have expanded.
And then the Vatican would have been in Carthage.
And then the Vatican would be in Carthage, yes, that's right, yes. That would be interesting to see what happens with the Muslim conquest in the Vatican, but that's another historical question, I guess, for another time. Yes, but often major movements in history occur by the narrowest of margins, where at the time it's really unclear what's going to happen. And looking back, it's, well, of course this happened. Well, no, in the time, it's very unclear how things are going to play out.